here in River West. Now, what makes this establishment slightly different is this public house is a business, and the type of business that they cater in general, known as a pub, bar, tavern, hard drinking establishment. Now, that's not unusual for Milwaukee, which seems to have a watering hole every other block, but what makes this public house here in River West unique as a business is it is a cooperative, a co-op. Most listeners will think of a co-op as an autonomous association of people who volunteer their time for a mutual social, economic, and cultural benefit. Cooperatives are generally nonprofit community organizations owned and managed by people who use its services. I've never heard of a co-op tavern. Can you give us an idea how different this is, if at all, from what most people are used to with, say, a co-op grocery store or a workers' co-op?
I think Gibson might be able to talk up to the difference between the grocery store and the bar, possibly a little better than I would.
It's true. In a lot of ways it's similar in that it's member-owned, where workers' co-op is worker-owned, but they also make up the membership. And like any co-op, it's one member, one vote. Similar to some food co-ops, we offer discounts on our products to our members. What makes it unique being a tavern is that there really aren't any others. There's one that opened in Boston, a cooperatively owned brewery and pub, and called the Black Star Co-op. And I just saw one today in, I think, Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, really?
Getting ready to open the 5th Street Co-op, and it's also going to be a brewery and tavern. So,
I heard there's going to be one in Portland or Seattle,
yeah.
and then I heard there's co-op, either co-op brewery or co-op brew pub in Grand Rapids that's trying to get off the ground too.
So,
Can't really verify.
I guess it'll be less unique as time goes on. When we were researching this stuff, I did come across a bunch in Canada and London, England, that were cooperatively owned bars. Most of them seem to be around universities. I know for a while the coffee shop at UWM was run, at least collectively, and looked at being a co-op, and apparently the store that they had in the architecture school there was a co-op for a while. But, yeah, and Black Star Co-op had been doing research for a few years before we opened, and it was really helpful for us to be able to look at their bylaws and articles of incorporation and whatnot, putting together this co-op. But tellingly, and getting back to answer your question, we mostly borrowed from the bylaws of the River West Co-op when we put together the bylaws for this place. So in lots of ways it is structured the same, and those bylaws were borrowed from the 5th Street Co-op in Madison, who I'm sure borrowed them from somebody else before then. So there it is.
All right. Well, this is a good segue into the history of this public house. So how did this really get started? What was, who said, hey, let's open up a drinking establishment, make it a co-op?
There were a number of folks from the co-op grocery store located 2.5 blocks south, and they kind of had the crazy idea that we should start more co-ops in the neighborhood. The idea being you can keep local money local, and you can have more control over what businesses are popping up in the neighborhood. You can respond to the unique needs of the neighborhood community.
organization open to accepting donations, funds? I mean, is that
Take
something?
any donation at any time. But
Can we?
it's not tax deductible, and
Yes, that's the caveat.
but yeah, we'll take it. Co-ops are, in every sense, accountable to your community and membership. There's a challenge with running a tavern in that we need licensed bartenders. People are going to take tips. We need to make sure we're doing that legally and ethically and respecting the labor laws and taxes. So it does present a challenge in running the bars. Whereas the co-op, there's over 100 volunteers who make that place run every day, and it wouldn't be able to run without them.
All the time.
And that is something that's really unique about the public house is that, there's been days where you come in and there's 2 or 3 different meetings happening. We do try and be an open space for groups to come in and do events, but also just hang out. We don't necessarily expect them to, give us money or even necessarily buy drinks, but
It always helps, though.
yeah, it does help. Yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, we do. And we do take being a co-op seriously, and I think it's something on the mind of all of our staff, all of our board, all the folks who are here. Even a lot of our patrons are well aware that they own this business, and it provides a different sense of accountability and to know that you're here on behalf of the membership and responsible for not only their money but their social investment in the public house too.
I think it's interesting because you think of generally, at least I do, grocery stores, and that kind of effort is starting out, maybe in somebody's garage, and it moves to the front porch, and eventually you say,
It's about how the food collection.
And then, but with a liquor establishment, it's kind of a different creature, in a way. And so, the first thought I think a lot of people may have is, people are volunteering there so they can drink, and of course you can make the same argument people volunteering at a food club so they can eat the food, but it's so unusual that it's because it's a place of leisure, I guess you would, generally, you don't think of it as a necessity, unless you're...
No, that's a really good point. Actually, it is, and it is totally, it's a totally different beast in that way, where the food co-op, and a lot of other co-ops are providing services that are much more fundamental, and having access to healthy, affordable food is way more important than being able to drink for cheap. But that's kind of why, Peter explained the origins of the public house too. I wouldn't be doing this if it was just to do a co-op bar. I mean, it's an idea we joked about for years. It's something that we always met at the Falcon Bowl after food co-op board meetings. And we would joke about having a co-op bar. But what made it important for me, and I think most of the people who are involved, was that we are taking all the money from this project to do other development. And, like the bakery is already...
Yeah, talk a little bit more about that. How now that you've paid your loan off and you're pretty established, 600 members plus events coming in, you have, just patrons, other people from, the neighborhood and outlining, hey, I want to see what this is. So you have this established, you're creating some profit. How is that going to generate more into other areas of the community? And talk a little bit about those areas that you're reaching out into.
Yeah.
We can start in a couple different places. Let's start by talking about the bakery. So, a handful of folks have been talking about, including the founders of this place, have been talking about a cooperative bakery in the neighborhood for a long time. And finally, a group of people got together and put up some flyers around the neighborhood, around town, saying, let's start a co-op bakery. And they had a big meeting. The first meeting was huge. It was here. It took up this entire space. And it was kind of disorganized, but that's how they start. And then they've had subsequent meetings. When was that? Was that winter? It was winter sometime.
Yeah.
changes as roles get more focused and people are more certain people fall away because they can't dedicate enough time to the project. They can't do the research. They've got other things going on in their lives. So it gets smaller and smaller. But as long as there's sort of like a dedicated core group to make it happen, these things can really come to fruition.
Interrupt, but like also like the size of that meeting also shows the level of interest and support in the neighborhood, which I think is a good indicator, and kind of reflects the co-op. Like, so you have a lot of people who are interested. As things shake out, you have a few people who are going to do the work, you know. But on behalf of those people who are at that initial meeting, like, you know, so yeah.
And you could probably add 5 or 10 people to each person who showed up, saying that people would definitely come and support this.
Exactly. And once the doors open, you'll see another influx of people, and it might not be anybody who's involved with the original group now, which again is a beautiful thing about co-ops. You know, there's, even our current board of directors have people, you know, we're familiar with here, but it's not the same board we had initially. It's not the same group that was, you know, the steering committee and planning committee before we opened.
So it's pretty much totally different except for maybe 3 or 4 people.
Yeah, but there's still a consistency of, you know, most of those faces are faces who I saw at some of the early meetings when there was a larger group meeting before we opened the public house door. So just to connect to what Peter was saying, that room of 30 people or whatever, I think we can look forward to seeing some of those people involved with the bakery 2 years from now, 3 years from now.
It shows you how an idea, you know, once you put the will towards it, once you put the effort towards it, to go from 0 to 1. You know, I mean, that's the hardest part, isn't it? Just, you know, everybody can sit around and talk about, yeah, this would be great, that would be great.
Yeah.
But then when you say, okay, let's do this thing, you know, it gets the lift, and then, you know, that's it. And at that point, you know, you can steer it for as long as you can.
In classic economic theory, you know, one of the biggest barriers is access and startup, you know, and that's with co-ops, that's even more the biggest, you know, barrier. It's like, you know, co-ops once open are incredibly stable business model. The biggest challenge is getting them open and getting the people involved, getting the time, you know, the volunteers, the capital, you know. So
there's some crazy statistic. It's like 90% of co-ops are open after the first 5 years, or like remain open 10 years after they open the door, but only 5% of traditional style businesses remain open after their first year.
It's interesting.
Yeah,
So there's an investment more than just, you know, profit, you know, motive. That there's something else that, you know, people feel they're supporting, you know, when they get involved in this or when they patronize such a place.
At the food co-op board, I can tell you how many times over the year I heard people talk about the feel of the place as a factor there. And it's something we've never been able to quantify or, you know, explain well, but so many people, you know, come in and just talk about the feel of the co-op or how it brings you back to the 70s or how there's a sense of, like, you know, community. And just the other day when I was bartending, a couple came in here and it was a slow night, and so I could hear their conversation, and, you know, one of the women looked at the other and said, you know, this just brings me back to the 70s, and there you go. So there is that hippie magic involved with the co-ops. And to seriously bring it back, I think Peter could explain more, like when we do talk about the barriers to startup being, barriers to entry being startup, you know, like that is exactly what the Cooperative Alliance is going to do, and what every cent of profit from the public house is going to be invested into.
Yeah, tell us more about that, because that expanding these ideas is really, I think, the new economics. So, you know, and you're at the forefront here.
That's the idea. We want to, speaking as broadly as possible, we want to try to create a model that can be replicated elsewhere. It's about empowerment, not like us trying to set up one large thing that like gets bigger and bigger and bigger, but like us setting up a funding model that can work in other places, like autonomously, and empower communities to respond to their own needs without having to formalize it to the point that we want to see it actualized. We've talked about it a dozen different.
Is it just a matter of funds, or is it just having people?
It's both. I mean, it takes an enormous amount of energy and an enormous amount of time, like time with elbow grease.
Yeah.
You know, putting stuff like this together. And starting capital is also hard to come by. I mean, we've been open for a year, and we're still open. You know, the doors are open, but we always need support. Like, these things can take off as long as like there's constant high level support.
So we need like a Bailey's building and loan. You know,
It's
a wonderful life.
yeah.
Probably not that far from yeah, what we're thinking.
Yeah.
But the idea isn't to give, say, like, let's go back to the bakery again. Like, they're going to have to get to a point where they have established that they will be able to be a solvent, autonomous business before the public house itself lends it or gives it any money. And actually, to start talking about that, the public house isn't going to be doing that. It's going to be like a broader organization that we're working on starting. We've got bylaws drafted and articles of incorporation drafted for the River West Cooperative Alliance, which will hopefully be doing advocacy, professional services.
So this is another group, another
Right.
organization.
It will be a co-op of cooperatives. So the members, probably very few starting out, maybe 5, 6, 7, maybe 9. The cooperatives themselves will be the members of this organization,
Yeah.
River West Cooperative Alliance. And as such, there will be like a very strange sort of commingling of like structures, because if you have a membership that's only 9 and the members are actually businesses, then like who votes at the annual general meeting, for
Yeah,
instance,
yeah.
which is something that is legally necessary as per Wisconsin statute 185, which covers cooperatives.
Yeah.
So we're working on that, and it takes a long time. It takes a long time to get these organizations off the ground, and to get the people dedicated to it. But we're extremely optimistic. We're really excited.
It sounds wonderful, and you know, just the expansion, you know, or just the idea of expanding, you know, I mean, you can kind of like a lot of co-ops, you know, once they're kind of established, they're established, and they don't, you know, venture very far from there. But this is moving into like the new economy, and what perfect timing is that?
I totally agree. Yeah, throughout the past year, all the political upheaval and strife, and especially among the left, like reimagining the way an economic system can work toward conscientiousness, toward sustainability, localism, doing things positively rather than negatively.
This is a good segue now. Does this establishment, does the public house have a mission statement? And I'm not asking you to pull it out.
Right there.
Oh.
No, it's kind of. No. We do have one. It's threefold. Do you have it off the top of your head?
Yeah, it was to have affordable, local, and tasty beverages. To be a venue and a community meeting space, and to propagate other cooperatives throughout the neighborhood. So it really is those are the 3 basic principles. Like last year's River West 24, I had to read our mission statement over and over hundreds of times. You think I'd remember it? It's not. It's not popping. That's the broadly the 3.
Yeah. And how is it well, we've kind of talked about this, you know, touched on it in and out of this conversation. How is everything working out? I mean, everybody's happy? Everybody feels pretty...
Of course not. And at the same time, we are thrilled and, you know, exhilarated to be a part of this, but like anything presents, you know, challenges. And I mean, you name it, from being a cooperative bar, which is in and of itself a unique, you know, model, being collectively managed, and, you know, a lot of the, you know, challenges challenges are also just the running of a bar that any bar owner runs into. Luckily here we have 12 to 15 people who are committed to being surrogate bar owners in one way or another by being here day to day and being part of the decision making. That also presents a challenge when you don't have somebody like John Ogletinski who sat at the the Falcon Bowl every day and sat at the end of the bar and watched the day-to-day operations of his bar and would bartend all the time. And, I think that's true of a lot of these small neighborhood bars, which we're emulating that model in some ways, but we're not trying to be a fancy Water Street or Great Street bar. And so there's, it's like anything, a double-edged sword.
Well, talk about this is probably a little darker, but it's something I suppose that crosses people's minds or will cross people's minds who want to open a bar. You get riffraff.
Yeah.
And we're also in River West, which is also a kind of a up and down, this week, that week, we go through stuff.
Overall safety of ourselves and our patrons is, a constant concern, and it's something that we deal with on a regular basis. There's always some kind of incidents, whether it's theft or violence or the threat of violence. It's something that we deal with probably daily in one way or another. The riffraff, most of our bartenders have lived in the neighborhood a while and have experience dealing with drunkards and riffraff from our day-to-day lives. But it's and it kind of connects, to something else we were hitting on earlier about, it being both a co-op and it being a bar. And, we've talked about this idea there's almost like two public houses at times. There's a public house, which is a cooperative, which is this community meeting space. And then there's a public house at 1 a.m. when, it's people who are drunk and people who are walking by the street. And, those are two, kind of different.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain. Which also connects to the challenge you were talking about earlier. Especially our bartenders are having to learn how to deal with both of those realities. Okay, so I have somebody, threatening a patron with a weapon, and I have to be well versed in consensus decision making and making sure that I'm transparently communicating to my coworkers and membership. It's two different challenges. But it's not much different from how it was at the food co-op too, where we still have to deal with challenging customers and organic, natural foods draw a certain kind of people, beautiful, creative people, also tinfoil hat type of people, and being an open community space also, you want to be welcoming to neighbors, regardless of age or, state of inebriation, but that presents a challenge too. So with both places, you're dealing with the reality of it being a business. Bottom line, full stop. You gotta stay in business. We don't want to say how cool it was while it lasted. And it being a space, that is open, welcoming, has the hippie magic, has the honest sense of ownership,
I can only come from people being involved, and the difference is that there isn't a boss hanging over you saying, this is how I want my place to look.
Right.
So you get
got
that.
a bunch.
You got a
bosses.
Yeah, but the more creative types will say, well, can I do this? And that at least that opens the opportunity for them for someone to say yes.
Yes, exactly. Probably yes. And something I've talked about over the years at the food co-op, and it's definitely true at the public house as well, is basically you have a handful of people who are doing a lot of the heavy lifting and dealing with the day-to-day pressures and stresses, so everyone else can enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that's part of your obligation to the mission or the job. And if you don't want that, there's definitely more lucrative places to work
cities that are also developing this. So do either of you go and consult with communities to, get this off the ground, get people who are interested saying, how do you do this? How did you do this?
Well, Gibson has consulted others for the foundation of other co-ops a number of times. I think as far as like the particular project that involves starting a lucrative business to help other co-ops start and
Flourish.
Yes. I think we're not quite there yet. We've got to make it happen here and happen like successfully and like honestly, transparently first. We have to set the example.
So you're still building this foundation, but so from what I can tell, it looks pretty stable. I mean, it looks like you're using good ingredients all the way around.
Sure.
And materials. Yeah. Everybody's not good. There's a lot of wood in here too.
Always precarious.
The pew you just knocked on came from All People's Church, which is an awesome church, and Pastor Steve is also on our board of directors, which is amazing. We have a Lutheran minister on the board of directors of a bar. One of the things that we've learned, the board, one of the roles of the board of directors of the co-op, the major role is to be financially and legally responsible for the business. And all of us involved on the board, involved with the day-to-day finances of the place, have learned you can never rest on your laurels. It's like any business. It's always going to be a challenge. As soon as you get comfortable, something's going to come up. I think you do hit a point where it really is like you kind of have a good template, on a day-to-day running of the place where it is stable. From my experience, we're about 5 years away from that, and it's because it takes a lot of trial and error, failing, trying again, failing better, and it may seem stable. We're still figuring out. We need this to be lucrative, and if the public house doesn't make money, we're not going to be able to fund the bakery, and we're not going to be able to, create more co-ops with our revenue. I think these cooperatives will still happen, but the whole point of doing this is to help make it easier and spread quicker the community ownership.
Well, let me ask you, is the organization open to accepting donations, funds? I mean, is that
take
something?
any donation at any time.
Can we?
It's not tax deductible, and
yes, that's the caveat.
We'll take it. Co-ops are, in every sense, taxed and treated like a traditional corporation. And a traditional corporation levels of investment with stock ownership will control how much say you have. In a co-op, it is one member, one vote. Everyone has the same say. Otherwise, basically like any other corporation, the state of Wisconsin, we're lucky to have state laws that govern cooperatives and are designed to protect both the business and the membership as owners and ensure that the members are owners of the business. But otherwise, it is treated like any other corporation. So, we can take donations, but it won't allow for a tax write-off. And loans, we try and avoid commercial loans for lots of reasons. And that's one of the advantages of being a cooperative is you do have access to that member capital and member loans. It's a system that we prefer because, again, if we are paying a return, and we did pay interest on several of the loans, it was paid back to the person who loaned it to us, not to the bank.
Yeah, which is always, preferable, in a lot of ways, because again, you have this, the idea of the profits going into, building the community as opposed to somebody's pocket is a huge difference.
Yeah.
You build his house or her house rather than, spreading the wealth. And I think, again, there's that, the economy right now is just almost begging for that. So coming in on this right now was a really good time. Now I know that some businesses that are, having a struggle. I'm seeing more and more being closed up, boarded up, along with the houses now. How's this doing?
Finance.
Well, part of my job is to be concerned with that on a day-to-day, and we have a good cash flow. Most of it at this point is due to our member equity. If we had to pay back every membership right now, I suppose we would have enough actually to cover it at this point with a little left over when it comes to inventory and what we have in the bank, but we're not at the point where we'd like to be.
Is that just because of the economy, you think, or,
No.
or is it because just the process of going, establishing a business?
Yeah, I don't think the economy has much, if anything, to do with it, to be honest. Both food and booze are relatively inelastic products, and that people still buy them regardless of their income. So we definitely cannot blame the economy for any struggles we've had. I mean, most of it has been just the day-to-day running of business and being mindful of your costs and your income.
Now, if people want to come here, people, want to get involved, who do they contact? Where can they go?
Well, they could just stop in and talk to their friendly bartender.
Okay. How would they contact you, say, over the internet?
We have an email address. It's info@riverwestpublichouse.org.
Okay.
To book an event, it's events@riverwestpublichouse.org. And to check in and see what's up, we have a blog/website, riverwestpublichouse.org. And we have a Twitter handle. It's rwph, and we have a Facebook, River West Public House.
Well, this is wonderful. So you're all out there on the social network. There's no way that people cannot find you if they just typed in
We
River
do
West
have a
Public
pretty
House.
discreet sign
Yeah.
on the front of the building.
Yeah, they can definitely find us on the internet, finding the actual building. My aunt just told me last week that when she tries to send her friends here, she tells them to drive down Locust Street, look for the shitty signage, and that's the public house.
Sometimes the light maybe won't be on either.
Well, you do have the park next door.
Yeah.
That's a really...
It is.
If you hit the park,
Yeah, when you see Garden Park, that's where you're at. And on a serious level, our proximity to Garden Park is not an accident. That was one of the reasons we chose this location. That is a community-owned space. It's a city lot, but the community has taken care of it for the last 12 years and operated a farmer's market, took care of the landscaping.
and it housed the original Gordon Park Food Co-op and Outpost.
Yes.
When it was the Pulaski building. Little River West history there for you.
So that's, there's something magic under the ground there, I guess, huh?
It's an
springs
ancient
forth.
hippie burial ground.
Well, I want to thank my two guests today, Peter Murphy and Gibson Caldwell, for talking to us about the River West Public House on River West Radio and 3 Words Radio. All I can say is this has been a pleasure. I learned an awful lot, and I wish you all the greatest success. I'll try and help that.
Likewise.
When I can. And I just want to remind the public that, you have these opportunities to get involved in your community and also preserve your airwaves. You own them. Take good care. Thank you very much. This is Liza Brooks out from the River West Public House. Have a good day.
That's all.